where do I start when discussing the Christopher Ward C65 Chronograph? I guess I should start with the title saying that this chronograph has officially dethroned my favorite chronograph from the 1990s. Back in 1997, one of my first gifts to myself in my professional career was buying a Breitling Crosswind chronograph. It was powered by the reliable and popular Valjoux 7750. From 1997 till about 2012, I wore that watch on my wrist at least 6 days a week nonstop. Once in a while, I would throw on some other random watch that I was into at the time, but always found that Crosswind back on my wrist. That was about the time that Panerai really became popular, and my watch infatuation really kicked into high gear. I let the Breitling go, cycled through a couple Panerais, IWCs, Seikos, micro brands, and the like from there. But I never forgot about the Crosswind and always tried to replicate that same feeling I had with that special watch with some random Swiss chronograph housing the Valjoux 7750 movement, but nothing ever compared. Fast forward a couple hundred watches later, I was approached with this Christopher Ward C65 chronograph in a trade deal. Obviously, I took the trade offer, and I have to admit, this is my favorite chronograph I've had to date, and that's saying a lot. The Crosswind held a special place in my heart because I had it for so many years and have so many memories with my kids, my wife, and I wish that I still had that Breitling in my collection to this day. So one of the downfalls of owning a chronograph with the indestructible Valjoux 7750 movement is that any watch you have with that movement is going to be extremely thick. And I knew that coming in with the Christopher Ward C65 chronograph. But the other thing I didn't tell you, I've owned 3 other Christopher Ward C65 watches over the years. And one of my favorite case designs has been this C65. I've had both GMT versions, the one that looks like a Rolex Explorer and the Pepsi version one. And I even had the regular 3-hand automatic one. But every one of those examples, they did not have a screw-down crown. When I was offered this watch as a trade, I found out it not only had a screw-down pusher or pushers, but the crown screwed down as well. I was super intrigued. But then came the issue about the thickness of the movement. The Christopher Ward runs a Sellita 7750 clone movement, the SW510BHA. Now I understand the Sellita uses the same patents as the Valjoux, but even with this movement, you get that same rotor wobble. You know that pulsations feeling when the 7750 is on your wrist? I know those of you that own one do. Well, I happen to love that about the movement. Anyway, I knew it was going to require the same amount of thickness in this watch, but at the same time, I knew how much I loved the C65 light catcher case. Other reviewers have said that because underneath the Caseback took the bulk of that thickness, that this watch wore really well on the wrist. Hearing these reviews, I was willing to give it a go. So I had very high expectations going into this trade deal. So here we are. I've now had the opportunity to spend the last month with this watch, and it has officially become my most favorite chronograph ever. So let's first run through the specifics. The case is a 41mm case. It does have 22mm lug widths, and the lug to lug is 47mm, and the website says it's just over that. And the thickness is still 15mm. But you have to take into an account the beautiful box sapphire crystal on top of the watch that makes up at least 1.5mm, at least. But notice the underside of the case, it's thicker, and that's to house the Sellita movement. The combination of the light catcher case, the turn down of these lugs, the way this watch sits on the indentation of my wrist, it makes it feel like a maximum of like 12mm. I should also mention in hand and size to my 7.25 inch wrist, the C65 Chrono comes in at 169 grams. And just holding the watch, the build quality is premium feeling. It does feel as premium as any other Swiss watch that I have owned. It feels so solid. No funny noises like the bracelet tingling around when you shake it. It just feels like one solid piece of stainless steel goodness in hand. If you take a look at the dial, it's obviously styled after the 1970s yachting chronographs that were very popular back then. Even though I've always been intrigued with yachting chronographs, yachting is not in my wheelhouse of skill sets, especially because I live in the desert. But the pop of color in the subdial, the pop of orange on the chronograph hand, it's just so damn cool. And take a look at these applied markers. The combination of the subdials and the raised markers give this chronograph dial a 3D type of look from most angles. The sunray blue, it's so nice to look at. And when the sun hits the dial, it's very warm and inviting. And combined with the colors in the subdial and the chronograph hand, this watch comes to life when it's on your wrist. I've looked at the dial with a loupe, and I have to say I'm impressed with the quality control on the dial. It may not be grand Seiko finishing, but there aren't any specks of dust or debris, and the hands are near perfect on the sample that I own. I don't want to spend too much time on the light catcher case itself, but I do just want to emphasize it's one of my favorite case designs of all time. The different facets combined with the brushing and the polished surfaces across the case is very well executed. The way it wears on my 7 1/4 inch wrist is perfect for me, and adding a couple millimeters in bulk due to the movement has not changed the way it wears from my previous C65s I've owned. One of the defining features of the C65 line of watches is this thin bezel that encompasses the beautiful box sapphire crystal. It is an aluminum insert, but the thinness of the bezel itself really showcases the beauty of the dial. One of the things that Christopher Ward chose to do, which I absolutely love, is they put a display case back on this watch. I'm a huge fan of being able to see the details of a watch movement. I don't even care if it's an inexpensive NH35, but being able to see what's powering this beautiful mechanical marvel on my wrist is so much fun for me as a watch enthusiast. For me, this watch lives on the bracelet. But don't think I haven't looked at my options. The bracelet is so well made, as it does taper from 22mm to 20mm to the clasp. The Christopher Ward clasp is very well executed. It has a 2-button deployment clasp, but also has that quick adjust for those warmer days when your wrist swells up just a little bit. But take a look at how well it matches with the Barton silicone strap. Doesn't that look amazing? And throw it on some different brown leather straps and look how it changes the look of this watch. And since the bracelet does have a quick release underneath the lugs, swapping out bracelets for straps, it's so easy to do. You put this all together and Christopher Ward managed to make a chronograph with my favorite movement, kinda, and it wears like a 3-hand watch. Amazing. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what are some of the negatives of this watch? So I come from the point of view that no watch is perfect, so I'll give you a couple cons that I've found. Let's start by discussing the screw down pushers. Personally, I love having screwed down pushers for everything because I spend most of my time in the water or around the water, so I love it. Having a chronograph that's 150 meters of water resistant, but having the peace of mind of screw down crowns on the pushers and on the main crown is perfect for me. But some people will find it frustrating to operate the chronograph. You have to unscrew the top and bottom crowns to operate the chronograph. But personally, I'm willing to sacrifice the ease of use of the chronograph in order to have water resistance. The next negative for me would be the 22mm lug width. I really wish that if they were going to stay with 22mm lugs, the bracelet would taper to 18mm instead of 20mm to give us a more dramatic taper and more comfort on the wrist. But I also have to keep in mind, this is a personal preference to have 20mm lugs versus 22. The bezel itself, it is thin. It is pretty hard to grip. The action itself is very pleasing. It just is a little difficult to operate since it is so thin. And there's an aluminum bezel insert. Personally, I don't look at this as a negative because I will enjoy how this watch will patina in the years ahead. However, I know a lot of you will prefer a ceramic bezel insert or something comparable to that. The lume on the watch is okay. It starts off nice, but it does fade fairly quickly. Another negative in my view is that this is the only colorway of this watch. Personally, I'm a black dial watch kind of guy. Most of my dive watches are all black dials. I'm not a huge fan of blue dials, generally speaking. So having this watch in different colorways would be awesome, in my opinion. But I know the look that Christopher Ward was going for with the Yachting chronograph, so this is just going to have to do. But boy, if they had this in a black dial or a white dial variant, look out. Hey guys, last week when I filmed this video, the website had the C65 available for about $1,800 US, and now it is gone off of the Christopher Ward website. So for those of you that were wanting to buy one, you're gonna have to find it on the secondary market now. I'm sorry. Look, I'm a huge Christopher Ward fan. I love what they're doing. I love what they're offering, especially as of late. Just recently, I reviewed a bel canto from one of my friends. I'm so excited to see what Christopher Ward is going to do in the years ahead. And think about this. In 1997, I purchased my Breitling Crosswind from an AD for $4,000. That was in 1997. In 2023, you can get a C65 for $1,800 on the Bracelet. If it wasn't an apples to oranges comparison, it would be like deflation in 2023. Wouldn't that be something? Well guys, I can't say enough good things about this watch, and really about Christopher Ward themselves. If you've ever been on the fence about trying one, I highly advise that you try a Christopher Ward watch and see the build quality for yourself. And for those of you that have owned Christopher Ward, jump down in the comments below and tell us your thoughts about the brand and your experiences with them. And if you've made it this far, let me introduce myself. My name is Blake. I'm a bit of a watchaholic, and I think if you made it this far, I'm gonna assume you are one too. Hey, make sure you click like and subscribe to this channel. Like the video if you can, it definitely helps out. I have so many more reviews to come. I'm gonna be putting them together for you. I wanna thank you for spending your most valuable time with me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.